Hello, Colonel Bond. How are you?
I'm doing well. I apologize. I slipped off to fix me a cup of coffee. I'm tired.
Oh, that's all right. I understand. We're so glad that you're with us on this evening. I'm Reverend Joe Archie, the host of our Solidarity Wednesdays, and I'm so glad that you've taken the time to be with us.
Yes,
Also,
sir.
we have Doug Lanter as our Director of Communications for our annual conference, and he'll be managing our time together. So thank you again for being with us, Colonel Bond.
Yes, sir.
We're going to jump right into the issues. We have about 65 participants, members of United Methodist churches on the Eastern Shore of Maryland and in Delaware. And so everyone who is on our broadcast, let me just introduce Colonel Bond a little bit before we get right into the questions. Colonel Bond is the Chief of Police of the Newcastle County, Delaware Police Force. And I'm reading from Delaware Online. In 2017, the first African-American to hold the position of Newcastle County Police Chief. And according to your own words, Reverend, I'm calling you Reverend.
No, please, no.
You're used to dealing with so many pastors.
Don't elevate me to that.
All right.
Not worthy of that.
Colonel Bond, you said in your own words, you're surrounded by the most innovative and talented minds in law enforcement today. And according to Delaware Online, you are responsible for overseeing about 400 sworn officers. And so that's just by way of introduction. Again, thank you for being with us. Some of the things, Colonel, that we are dealing with, of course, I'm sure you are aware of some of the thoughts in our society today around policing. Some of the issues that we want to talk about include, I'm going to just jump right into it. We've got an issue where folks are talking about defunding the police. And that's an issue that it might mean different things to different people. I know for some, it elicits fears that we're going to have either police who are not funded properly, police departments who are seriously having less officers on the force. Also, we have others who are saying, well, when we say defunding the police, we mean taking some of the monies that we have been traditionally used to ramping up police departments and using them to promote better and more social services in the community. What do you say about that? Have you had those discussions, Colonel Bond, with members of the force and persons who you know out in society? And I'm sure you probably had questions regarding that.
Okay, well, let me turn this up a little bit, Reverend. Well, again, thank you very much for the opportunity for me to be here this evening and to say a few words and to talk about law enforcement and our relationship with the community and how we conduct our business. And I wanted to preference everything I say by saying that much of my response is going to be catered towards what I know best, the law enforcement department I know the best, which is Newcastle County, where I've had the opportunity to be a police officer for the past 29 years. And so you'll hear me frequently say what my experience has been, and it has been my experience with Newcastle County. Yes, obviously there's been a lot of talk about defunding police departments across this country. And I think that what a lot of people do not understand, and again, I speak from Newcastle County, is that while we have a budget, I manage a budget of about $72 million per year. 80% of that money that we spend is basically on salary, wages, and benefits for our officers. The rest of that deals with your operations, overall operations of the police department. Now, for Newcastle County, that leaves very little room for training, equipment. We spend most of it, like I said, in personnel. So we rely heavily on grants. Now, we are a police department that we have a very aggressive grant writing program. We've had that for a number of years. So we receive several $1 million. So we rely heavily that have allowed us to do the advanced training, send our officers away for advanced training in a number of areas of concern. When we initially started off our body-worn camera, we're the only police department, major police department in the state of Delaware that has all of our officers have body-worn cameras. When we initially started that came out of grant funding because it is so expensive that it, from an operational standpoint at that time, there was no way that we could be able to fit that in. And so we rely heavily on grants in order to make ends meet for us. We created a behavioral health unit that got off the ground where it's a mental health professional teamed up with a police officer, and we've combined them with our Hero Help program that deals with substance abuse, people who are suffering from substance abuse. And we got that program off the ground by way of grant funding. And so when you talk about defunding the police department, what I would say is that we couldn't stand to take that hit. And I think a lot of police departments are the same way. Because when you start taking away money from agencies that do not have the same type of aggressive approach we have towards grant funding, what you're talking about is you're talking about taking away staffing, police officers. That means you're not going to hire as many. That means that you're not going to have the equipment, number two. And number three, and most importantly, I think you're going to have a hit in your training and your ability to train. And in law enforcement, as we all know, things are always evolving and always changing. And there's always a need for training. The things that we trained in when I came on 29 years ago, some of that, if we're still doing that training, has advanced. There's more hours that are required. The training has become more expensive. And so if you start talking about defunding the police departments, you're talking about taking away those things. You're also talking about having to make cuts to maybe some of the community outreach programs, which are sorely needed as we're going out here trying to bridge the gap and have that relationship with the communities. And so I think that people have to be very careful about that and understand what it means. Now, I understand that there's a need for money to go to other areas and to deal with some of the social problems and concerns that we have. I just don't think that the answer is going to police departments where they are already, most police departments are already operating on a shoestring budget and like us getting by with grants. And now you're talking about taking away that. I think that it can have an adverse effect on police departments' ability to go out to actually protect and serve. And that to me is very concerning. Now, I've heard a little bit of talking about it here in Newcastle County, but it hasn't reached the level that it has in some other areas.
Thank you. I want to ask you about, there's the bill called the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. It is a bill that bans no-knock warrants in federal drug cases, prohibits racial profiling, transforms police immunity laws. It also bans chokeholds and makes lynching a federal crime. Is that in any way affecting the work that you do in the Newcastle County Police Department regarding these issues? And also, could you speak to what I know the Delaware legislator has recently talked about that, and Governor Carney has spoken about similar issues as well. Can you talk about that, please?
Well, as far as what you talked about, no, it really doesn't change anything for our police department at all. What we do all the time is, excuse me 1 second. What we do anytime when there's incidents that take place, whether they be on a local level or a national level, we always make it a point to take and look at those, dissect them as much as we can, in order to learn what took place, what happened, and whether or not we have a potential for the same situation happening here in Newcastle County. And following the horrific murder, or as I've called it many times before, public lynching of Mr. George Floyd, we sat down and we looked closely at our policies and our procedures. And while we had it loosely written in our policies about a duty to intervene, what we came out of it, when I say we, I'm talking about myself and my command staff, what we realized is that we needed to have wording that was more specific to the duty to intervene. In other words, if I'm an officer or one of our officers sees another officer that's applying unnecessary or excessive force, that officer has a duty to intervene in that situation to stop it from going any further. And I think it had any of those officers that were there when Mr. Floyd was lynched had intervened and pushed that one officer off, perhaps we wouldn't be on this phone call today. But that didn't happen. And so we, on June 24th or 23rd, that policy went into effect with Newcastle County. We also looked at the chokeholds. And while we have never trained on chokeholds, it was not part of our weaponless defense. What we decided and what we wanted to do was make it clear to our officers that the use of any chokeholds was not permitted unless it was a deadly force situation. And that's the situation where you feel that you are in a position where perhaps maybe you can't get to your weapon, you have no other choice, but you feel like this person is about to take your life or take someone else's life. And that in those situations there, an officer will be permitted to utilize a chokehold. They will be permitted to pick up a brick. If a brick was nearby and that's all they had to defend themselves, they would be permitted to use that brick to get that person under control if that's what they had to do. But we put it in our policy, and we made it what we wanted, the highest offense, that if there's a violation of it, and we do our investigation, that the officer, if their charges are sustained, they will be facing suspension up to dismissal for the first offense. And so, yes, we have taken a look at it. As far as the no-knock search warrants, we have moved away from them some time ago. It's been a long time since I've done the search warrant, but there was back many years ago when I worked in detectives, you always had to have outlined the circumstances which supported your reasoning for asking, because we had to ask the magistrate court judge or superior court judge for permission to actually carry out a no-knock search warrant, because we understood many years ago how important it was to give people the time to recognize and understand what is taking place. So when you go up to that door, you're knocking on that door, you're announcing Newcastle County Police. You wait 10 seconds, you're announcing again, Newcastle County Police. And then you make entry if there's not an answer to the door, as opposed to going up and just forcing their way right into the home, which sounds like that was the case with Mrs. Breonna Taylor, that they just went to the house, no knock, went inside, and everything just went really bad quickly. So so there's a lot of things in that bill that you talked about that I think we're already doing and we're open to, and that's what I would really want to get across to everyone, is that I, as a person, am always looking to improve. The people who surround me are always looking to improve. And right now is not a time when we shut down. And I think that if there's any law enforcement professionals, especially if you're at an executive level, meaning that you are a high-ranking command officer, if not the chief of your police department, I think you're doing a disservice to the communities if you're turning a deaf ear to the demands and requests that are being made by those that we serve.
Thank you, Colonel. Going further in the bill, it does say that the chokehold would be a Class D felony. Again, I'm talking about what the Delaware Senate has looked at pass. And it's a Class D felony unless the officer causes serious physical injury or death. In that case, it would be a Class C felony, which could mean up to 15 years in prison.
That's correct.
All right.
That's correct. And I think it's, this question. I'm confident that it's going to be signed into law, and that's going to take place very soon. But that is correct.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a general thought within the Black community. I'm speaking from my experience now, and talking with folks within our church community and with our community at large, that the criminal justice system has treated Blacks unfairly, particularly young Black males. And a few months ago, as many of us throughout the Peninsula-Delaware Conference marched on the streets of small towns and cities throughout this peninsula, we heard from some who have considered themselves victims of the police and treated in ways that were ill-fitting what small crimes that they had committed, or in many cases had not committed a crime at all, but were treated harshly. And so that's a general consensus. Again, I'm speaking from my own experience and from the folks that I've talked with, not just in the Black community, but in the community at large. How has your department tried to meet with community leaders and general everyday folks within the community to try to dispel that idea and to try to hear the people out when they have these concerns?
Well, I think it starts with, that we have to have communication at all times. And to me, the best times are for communication. The best time to communicate is during those times when the seas are calm, when we can sit down at the table over a cup of coffee, and we can sit down and we can have conversation, and we can talk about what the concerns are about policing, the criminal justice system. But one part that I think is often left out is, and what people have to understand is, we as police, we are responsible for going out there and enforcing the laws. However, when it comes time for prosecution and how much time a person is going to serve if they've been found guilty of a crime, that rests with the Attorney General's office, the District Attorney's office, the judges, and so forth. And so I think that, oftentimes when people meet and they want to talk with me about it, I feel like we're also missing a key part of this whole process, is that the police will make the arrest, but it's not the police who prosecute, nor the police who have say in the sentencing that takes place for an individual. So I would like to, I think that we should also have them at the table. In terms of if the community, going back to the communication part, I think it's so important that we talk, and we have to have that. And I know for me, that is, I think, probably one of the strong points that I have, is that I've been able to get out, engage the community. I've always been that way, a person who likes to talk most of the time, and I don't have any problems with answering questions and listening to the concerns. What I think what's best about where I am right now is I can listen to these concerns, and I'm in a position that I can go back and I can affect change within Newcastle County Police Department. And so it's important that we have that communication, that we talk about these things, and that we're, as a police department, we're mindful of our interactions and making sure that we are not going out and unfairly targeting African Americans, minorities, while we're out here doing proactive patrols. And I think it's important that, for law enforcement, is, we'll probably touch on it. I might be getting ahead of myself, but the implicit bias. We're hearing a lot about people saying about implicit bias training, bias-based police training. Newcastle County Police Department, we came out with a policy banning racial profiling and bias-based policing in 2012. We have a policy that mandates this, and every officer that comes on, you read it, you understand it, you sign off on it. You also know that you can be held accountable. So we're always making sure that we're in our officers, in front of them, passing on information, letting them know about bias-based policing, that they need to be mindful of it. But over the last few years, we've really focused on the implicit bias because I think that that's important. It's sad, but it does happen in law enforcement across this country. And I'm not going to sit here and act like Newcastle County Police is a perfect police department, because we're not. I speak from my own experience when I tell this story, that myself, as an African-American male, right? I've been an African-American male all my life. And I've been on this job for 29 years. And I have had experiences with biases. And a quick story is a couple years ago, I went to St. Paul AME Church up on 33rd and Market in Wilmington, Delaware, for a program one evening. And when I was getting out my car and getting ready to go into the program, there was a group of young men, all African-American males, that were standing on the corner. And, they were dressed like how young men are dressed. They had the pants down, they had the hoodies up, and, and people were walking around them to try to get to the church. And I walked around them, and as I was walking, I was saying, why can't they take that nonsense somewhere else? Why they have to be up here doing this? And I went into the church and I sat down, and the program got ready to get started. And in walks the choir, and the band that was playing. Well, those young men that I had formed my opinion that they were no good, that they were in the way of people who were trying to go enjoy church service, all took their positions up there as the musicians for the band. I felt this big. And I sat there and I thought to myself, wow, why did you think that? And I can't help but think that a lot of that was shaped from experiences that I have had during my time as a police officer, quite frankly. And I know that as an African-American male, when I'm off work, most of the people that I socialize with, most of my friends are African-Americans. My fraternity, I'm involved with my fraternity, all African-American men. I mentor young men. I'm a part of their lives, like a second father to a few of them. And I had that thought. And so if I had that thought, what thoughts are the officers who work alongside of me having when they get off work and they don't have any interaction at all with any African Americans except for when they come to work? And when they come to work, their interaction is usually something negative. And so that's why I thought that it was so important that we bring this training to our police station, and not just at our police department, and not just have it one time, but to continue to have refreshers on that, as well as ethics and de-escalation and things of that nature. But that implicit bias is key. And I think that once you make people aware and make officers aware of it, and you continue to preach that, and you continue to preach about being professional, treating people with dignity and respect, I think at that point there, that's when you start to see the tides turn a little bit, and you don't see as much of what we see across this country with young Black men being arrested, having excessive force used against them. But you have to stay on top of it. It can't be something that you talk about one time a year and think that's going to solve the problem. That's not going to work. It has to be a continuous basis.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's important to hear. I think all of us, even within the African-American community, we have found ourselves in a position where we have prejudged someone based on the way they dressed, or the way they looked, or the way their hair was styled. I've been oftentimes said, like you, I've been Black all my life as well, so African-American male. There are times, though, that even on the road, I feel so much more comfortable in a suit and tie, or especially when I'm wearing a collar. I'm thinking if I do get stopped, the police will identify me as a member of the clergy, or if I'm in a suit and tie, then perhaps they'll think I'm some kind of businessman, versus when I am in my hoodie and jeans. You know, they might have a different understanding of who I am based on the way I'm dressed, and that's a real fear for African American males. And I'm sure that many of us can relate to that as well. And so I'm glad you shared that. There's something, Colonel, I want to read something here. It says the epidemic of incarceration has reached an all-time high, especially for people of color, according to AmericanProgress.org. While people of color make up 30% of the US population, people of color account for 60% of those who are in prison. The report goes on to say that the prison population grew by about 700% from 1970 through the late 2000s, and that's a rate that's outpacing crime and population rates. And in the United States, the cost of incarcerating someone for a year ranges between $15,000 and $30,000. So those are statistics and commentary I got from AmericanProgress.org. What are your thoughts about some of those things that I've just said around the population increasing, the prison population increasing, and the African Americans making up 60% of those in prison, whereas let me rephrase, people of color making up 60% of that prison population, whereas people of color only make up about 30% of the US population?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, Reverend, is sad. I think it's very sad. And I think it's a telltale sign that there's something wrong in this country when you have numbers that are like that. I think that there has to be a deep dive into what the root causes are for these young men, a lot of young men, to find themselves incarcerated. And we need to figure out what we can do as a whole, as a country and each community, to ensure that we don't have our young men finding themselves in situations where they are incarcerated. And that right there goes to on so many levels. We can talk about education, we can talk about poverty, we can talk about joblessness. There's so many things. We can talk about what I feel, honestly, what I feel that often gets overlooked, and is parenting and how children are raised now compared to how they were raised many years ago. And what I see and what I've seen is that, you know, partly because a lot of the young men are incarcerated, but there are a lot of young men who are having children that aren't a part of their lives. And I'm not saying that a woman cannot raise a child. They certainly can. But I believe that it is easier when it's a shared responsibility. And I also believe that, you know, when you have a strong role model, male role model for a young man that is in the house, who sets the example, who teaches you what the boundaries are, who teaches you that you will respect authority, because that starts in the household, and then it goes out to the classroom and the students and with the teachers and everyone else. But what we see time and time again, Rev, is a lot of these young men that are incarcerated are coming from homes where they don't have that. And they're going out and they're finding what they think is love by the guys that are out there that are not necessarily the people that we would want to be role models for our own children. And as a result of that, some decisions that they're making, they're finding themselves incarcerated. But I think that there's so many factors that go into this, that it's really sad. And I had the opportunity. I was invited. Was it this year? I think it was this year. Down to Sussex Correctional Institute. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why or how, but a lot of the inmates there had asked if I would be willing to come down there and sit down and talk with them. And I don't think any other police chief has ever gone down and did anything like that. But I went down there, and we sat in the room. It was about 35 or 40 of them. Some of them were there for, most were there for drug offenses. Some were there for murders and other violent offenses. And we sat in there for about 2 hours, and we talked. And we talked about everything. And when I left from there, what the theme was, what I talked about earlier. And a lot of those young men admitted that their lives would be different had their fathers been there. And so my question to them was this, that, okay, you know how you were raised, and you know how much you missed your father, and how you feel that if your father had been involved in your life, that maybe you wouldn't be in this situation here. Now, so it's up to you that when you are released, that you have to go out and you have to be a part of your child's life to make sure that your child doesn't follow in the footsteps that you did. So we have to really talk about that, and we really have to focus on that as much as anything else, because I know that I'm Vaughn Bond Jr., all right? There's a Vaughn Bond Sr. who's right up the road from me, called me a few minutes before I got on here. And I grew up in a household with Vaughn Bond Sr. and Althea D. Bond. And they set the limits on what I was going to do and what I wasn't going to do. And any of those times when I felt like I was going to step outside of those boundaries, Mr. Bond Sr. was there to let me know, you're not. And some of the things I tell them all the time, some of the things that they did to me, I should be doing warrants for them right now, and having them arrested. But I appreciate what they did, because they set the boundaries. And I think that is what we have to get back to. We have to really drive that home. I have 2 daughters, and we try to talk to them about making sure that you have, if you're going to be in a relationship, be in a relationship that's going to be meaningful. Think about the future, protect yourself. Don't bring a child into this world when you're not ready yet. For it. And I think that those are kind of conversations that we need to have with a lot of young people, so that they understand the importance and the responsibilities that come with that. And I think if we did that part, all right, because not only are they going to talk about respect and authority, but they're also going to be pushing their children about getting an education. And when you get an education, that opens up doors for you. But if you drop out of school in 9th grade, in this world right now, people with college degrees are struggling to find jobs, good jobs. So if you drop out of school in 9th grade, what do you have to look forward to in terms of being able to really support yourself? And so that right there is what we really have to get back to. We have to focus on family, and I'm here. I'm a believer in God. And I believe that church, I believe that God, this is my personal belief, not anybody else's, also has to be at the center of all that we do. And when we make God first, seek ye first the kingdom of God, you know the rest.
Yes,
That right there is what makes the difference. And that's something that I think that we have to focus on. And if we do that, I think that you can see these numbers start to come down.
Thank you, Colonel. The United Methodist Church, we have what we call the social principles, and some of the social principles range on a variety of things, from environmental justice to various social justice issues. One of the things that we talk about in our social principles of the United Methodist Church is we are encouraging people of faith to both practice and advocate for more restorative justice rather than a retributive justice. And we believe that it even starts with the policing, the first point of contact for many in the criminal justice system. So that's one question. Hold that thought. But also, there are folks who think legislatively it might be a good idea to eliminate drug laws, legalize all drugs, and the idea is that will reduce our prison population, and then we deal with those who are both those who have issues of addiction. We deal with that from a medical point of view. And what do you think about that? Has that been any discussion that you've had with along with legislators and the police? Because I can imagine that many of the arrests that you make, in many cases, are either drug related, someone either caught selling, or someone using, or someone committing crimes because of their state that they're in mentally and physically, causing them to commit a crime because they are have been affected by the use of drugs. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I say this, that we at Newcastle County Police Department, we started a few years ago a program that we call the Hero Help Program. And what that program is a program that we initially offered for individuals who were committing crimes to support drug habits and drug addiction. What we realized over the years, and going back to when I was a young patrol officer, is that handcuffing and arresting individuals who are suffering from substance abuse simply does not work. What works is getting that person the treatment and the help that they need. We understand that oftentimes that treatment and that help, they can enter into a rehab, but they may come out of that rehab and relapse. And we have to be there along with their family to pick them back up and put them right back in that rehab, and continue to do that for the long term until that person is able to beat this addiction. And so with our Hero Help program, when we initially offered that up, we were offering that that if a person was arrested for, say, committing property-related crimes, breaking into sheds, breaking into houses, things of that nature, instead of them going to jail and being arrested for it, if they agreed and we were set up and we made arrangements for them to go to a rehabilitation center, if they agreed to that and they completed the program, which lasted, usually 30 days, 60 days, and they completed that program and they continued to do the things that they had to do, then we would talk with the victims of those crimes, make sure that they were okay with it. And in most cases, people were, and we would not pursue the criminal charges or seek to have them incarcerated for it because they were seeking help. We've had so much success with that program as we really went on a campaign to launch it out there and get the word out. What ended up happening was we had people who were actually showing up at our headquarters and saying that I need help, or I have a son or a daughter that needs help. And the program continued to grow to the point that we had many partners. We were able to get and work with some of our resource partners and able to get people treatment at facilities that would run $30,000 a month. We would get scholarships, what they call scholarships. And so we were having people going there to get help and to get treatment. And so that part has been something that we have really taken a lot of pride in. I think it's made a tremendous difference in the lives of many people. I have letters and I get compliments all the time. And I know people personally who have had their children go through the program, and they have really turned their lives around. And I don't know if they would have had that same success if we put handcuffs on them, taking them to court, and then they would have been found guilty and went the traditional route of being incarcerated. I don't know if they would have had that same result. And because of the success that we've had with the program, it's been duplicated. We took it from someone else, another police department, but it's been duplicated by other police departments here in the state of Delaware. In terms of legalizing all drugs, I am not a proponent of it. I think that, it could open the door, I think, in my personal opinion, to experimental usage by young people, because now it's legal. I can go and get it. And do we really want to? And just like alcohol, the drugs, if it's sold in a store, it could very well find its way in the hands of a young person. So if you talk about legalizing all drugs, do you want a 15-year-old getting their hands on a small bag of cocaine, and because somebody else bought it legally, now they have it and they want to try it out? and they want to experiment with it. And I think we have to be very careful about that. I say that just look at the are you still there?
I think something happened, but if he should be back on in a minute if you want to keep going.
Okay. When I think about how right now there are compassion centers for marijuana, and I tell, and people don't really realize this, but in the drug-related homicides that we have, those homicides are never about cocaine. They're never about heroin. They're always over marijuana. Always over marijuana. And marijuana is something that a lot of people look at it like, okay, it's not a dangerous drug. But the violence that is associated with marijuana, and I think it's because of the profit margin that is associated with marijuana, but the violence that's associated with marijuana is at a higher volume, and it's more frequent than any other drug. And again, I'm speaking for Newcastle County, than any other drug that's out there on the street. So I'm not a person who is in favor of it. I think, the compassion centers, and I know there's been research about marijuana being helpful for people who are suffering from, the pains associated with cancer and other medical conditions. I think in those situations, there should be an exemption to it, but I do not support the legalizing of all drugs. I think that can end up really creating a more of a problem for us than we realize.
All right, Reverend Archie said that he's lost connection, but he's trying to get back on. So in the meantime, if anybody has any questions, we can start taking some questions, unless Colonel Vaughn, there's anything else you'd like to share at this point.
No, we're going to open it up to questions.
Okay. So we'll see if there's any questions. And like I said, Reverend Archie's trying to reconnect. I know we got some storms, so I don't know if that played a part or not, but he should be back on shortly. I don't see any questions yet.
So is everyone on this call, are they from the immediate area? Okay.
Colonel, everyone on the call here are, for the most part anyway, members of the United Methodist Churches on the Eastern Shore of Maryland or the state of Delaware. So I think we have 400 some odd churches throughout the peninsula. And so you have clergy and lay people who are on the call here. Okay.
That's great.
Okay, so we got some questions coming in now. Try to get to everybody's. This one says, you shared about the community programs. Can you expand more on that you're involved in?
On community programs for Newcastle County Police? Well, sure. So I talked a little bit about the Hero Help Program and our Behavioral Health Unit. Another initiative that we started last year, about a year and a half ago, is our mental health unit. And, that came about, just a little bit of background on me. I graduated from Delaware State. It was at that time Delaware State College, now Delaware State University, in 1991. And my degree was in psychology. And so I've always had an interest in psychology. Just when I graduated from college, I figured that since I just barely got out of there, it wasn't no need for me to take any more chances. So I'm gonna just go on out here and grab me a job. So that's what I did. And but over the years, what I realized is in law enforcement that we encountered so many people who were suffering from mental illness. And I am a firm believer that at the root of many of the issues we have in our community, a lot of it can be traced back to mental health. And unfortunately, in some of our communities, especially communities of color, what we're finding is that that a lot of the people in these communities of color are not receiving treatment for their mental health issues. And as a result, you're seeing more and more inappropriate behavior, also violent behavior taking place, because we have so many that have not had an opportunity to go there. And so to go get treatment. And so what we decided was I wanted us to have a mental health professional assigned to our police department and teamed up with an officer that had a background, educational background, and some practical experience in dealing with people who suffer from mental illness. And so we put together this program, and our initial partner was with Connections, where we had a mental health professional and a police officer that were going out, and they were dealing with individuals that we came into contact with that were suffering from mental illness. And sometimes in our line of work, it may be that a person is calling 911, believe it or not, 125 times a month. And that person is suffering from mental illness. You know, you go there, you talk to them, you talk to the family, and they don't know exactly where to go. By having this mental health professional embedded with the police officer, we were able to address issues such as that, as well as issues dealing with homelessness, financial issues, meeting some of the needs of families who are dealing with mental health issue within the families. And it really took off. We have avoided the incarceration of individuals who in the past might have been arrested simply because they were having a mental health episode. And we've been able to divert hundreds of people away from the criminal justice system and get them on the right track in terms of where we can get them the help and the treatment that they need. And I can tell you that out of all the programs I've been a part of, this is by far one of the things that I'm most proud of about our agency. And we had so much success with it that we actually just a few months ago received a grant for a few $1 million from the federal government. And we have partnered up with Christiana Care. We just finally finished the paperwork and signed off on the contracts. And so we're going to be hiring Christiana Care is partnered with us, and we're going to hire an additional 6 civilians to be a part of this behavioral health unit. And I've also moved an additional officer over so that we can continue our efforts to make inroads into these communities and to help people. And, you know, I tell another quick story. It was, if you look up, it was in Delaware, Delaware Online. They did a large article on our mental health card. And I got the paper, and actually one paper came to my office and somebody took it. And so that night I went out looking for a paper. And I was, again, I'm dressed in civilian clothes, and me and my wife was riding around. I said, I need to get a paper. And it was getting close to 9 o'clock. So a lot of places were going to close and papers had sold out. And I got to the last place, Rite Aid, right up here in People's Plaza. And so when I went inside, they had one paper left. And I grabbed the paper, and it was the front page of the paper, and it was talking about what we were doing in our mental health card. And so I went to pay for the paper, and the lady, the cashier, pointed to the article and said, "You have to read this article." She said, "Newcastle County Police, they are doing a great job." And I said to her, I said, "You think so, huh?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "They're doing a great job. You have to read it. What they're doing to help people with mental illness." She said, "It's amazing." And so on the front page of the paper was a large picture that they had taken of me while I was talking during the interview. And I looked at it and I pointed, I said, "Yeah," I said, "I think that guy thinks it is too." And she said, yeah, that's the chief. That's the chief. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." So it kind of looked familiar. And then she looks down at the paper, and then she looks up at me. She looks down again. And when I tell you that this lady broke out crying.
My Lord.
And then she told me, she said, "Your officers came to my house." And she said, "My daughter has mental health issues, and they came to my house." And she said, "The way that they handled my daughter and treated our family. She said, I will never forget it. She said, they have been a godsend to us. And right then and there, I knew we were on the right track with doing something. But when I had that confirmation, that God would set it up, that I would run into her. Out of all the other places I went to, there were other papers, that I ran into her. When I got in the car, my wife said, what'd you do, run into somebody you know? And I started telling her, and I said, you know what? If I go and tell this story to anyone, I said, they're going to think I'm lying. I said, but that's exactly what happened. And so, again, that is something that we're very proud of. It's a program. And then the other programs that we're doing, we have a mobile PAL play zone where we have 2 PAL centers. We have officers that are assigned to those PALs. But we have a lot of communities where the young kids aren't able to actually make it to the PALs. They don't have transportation. And so one of our officers came up with the idea that we would use some grant funding money, and we would buy all the equipment that the kids would have at a PAL. We would load it into a trailer, and we would go to some of the neighborhoods where they normally see the police as they're taking enforcement action, and we would shut down the road. And the first few times I went with them, it was funny because when we got there and we started setting up the cones and we shut down the road, the first thing that everyone thought was that there was a crime that happened, that there was a homicide, that there was a shooting. And then they saw us unloading basketball courts, and they saw them setting up the painting station and setting up the snack station. And everybody's like, what's going on? They pulled out the football and the baseball and the soccer ball. And before you know it, kids were circling around trying to fill it out. And before you know it, the street was packed with kids out there playing, community members, coming out. We had water ice. And so what we did with that is last year, because of COVID, now we had to put it on hold. But last couple of years, we took that to all of the communities. Twice a week, our community services unit were going to different communities and setting up shop and doing that, making inroads to the community. Going out there and doing the very thing that all of us said during our interview process, that you come on the job, nobody says they come on the job because they want to fight crime. Most of the people tell you that they come in because they want to make a difference in the community. They want to serve their community. So what we're going to do at Newcastle County is we're going to give you that opportunity. I want to see if you want to take advantage of it.
Praise God. They want to make a difference. Brother Doug, did we get Bishop Johnson's question already?
No, we that was the first question, so we can lump this one in there. What can churches, the police, and other citizens do to work together to get to know each other and build a better community of respect and love?
Well, I think that it starts with, again, like any relationship, it starts with communication. I think that we have to reach out to one another, and we have to sit down. We have to have scheduled meetings, even when there's nothing going on. Let's talk, as I said earlier, when the seas are calm. Let's sit down and talk about what we can do, how we can partner together in order to better serve our communities. Because at the end of the day, the way I look at it is, the police and the churches are trying to do the same thing in a lot of respects. We're trying to make our communities better. We want safer communities. We want more inviting communities. We want to see the people in those communities flourish. We want to see them do well. We want to see generations do well. And so it's going to take us all working together, sitting down and talking and having those conversations and supporting one another. 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure how many know, but in Delaware, they had protesters come to every major police department and a bunch of the smaller police departments. They had protesters on their front steps of their buildings, surrounding their buildings here in Delaware. There was only one major police department that did not have any protesters come to the front door, and that was Newcastle County Police Department. We didn't have any protesters. Now, we were prepared. We thought that they were going to come, and we had an area set up that if they came, they could protest over there, and I had planned to come out and sit down and talk with them. But it never happened. And I thought about having a police and community prayer service, And I thought about it, and I said, I'm not sure. Well, one of my officers, Corporal Gelati, saw me. He walked by my office and he asked me, did I have a second? I said, yeah. He came into my office. He said, sir, I think we should have a police and community prayer service. I said, you kidding me? And he said, yes. And I said, man, I was thinking about that. So long story short, we reached out to a lot of the clergy here in Delaware, and from all different religious backgrounds. And we put it out and we put it together. And like it was 2 weeks ago on a Tuesday evening, in the front of our police station, we had a police and community prayer service. And when I tell you that it was well attended and people enjoyed themselves, it was a great time. And as I said when I spoke, that we encounter situations where the only way that you're going to resolve this is not through your own will and your own might. Sometimes you just have to be on your knees. If not all the times, you have to be on your knees and you have to pray about it. And where we are in this country right now, that's what we have to do. And I can tell you we did it. And we have demands for us to do it again. The only backlash that I got was I received a few phone calls from some churches who said, we didn't know anything about it. And how did we not know about it? And we want to be a part of it next time. So we're going to make sure that we get that out and do a better job of advertising it. But I think that was one way that we can show that we are united, that we can come together, and that we can work together to address a lot of the problems that we're seeing in our communities today.
Amen. Well, thank you. Well, that's very well said. I hope that I saw you on a broadcast that happened with Simpson United Methodist Church, and you were part of the panel discussion there. And so you have been involved with one of our own United Methodist churches, and so
yes.
I thank you for that as well. And so I'm sure that you probably get a lot of invites, and probably not able to do them all and still do your duty as the chief of police for Newcastle County. But thank you for making that time for the churches. I know you're a man of faith, and then that's important to you as well. Absolutely. There's a question, Doug, did we answer the question from Joe Johns? How many people are you responsible for, Colonel Vaughn?
Well, we have an authorized strength of 400 sworn, and I work alongside of 33 or 34 non-sworn. So it's a total of 434 people.
All right. And there is a comment from Kim Hockman. Dr. Kim Hockman is one of our deacons. She's joining us from Colorado, but she recently moved there from Delaware. She was a resident of Hockessin, and she just wants to say thank you for your service and for your time tonight.
And we do have more questions. I don't know the time allotment, but we do have some others in the question and answer section. So I can try and get to as many as I can based on the time. Can he speak to the federal troops coming into local forces?
Well, I tell you, y'all asked some tough questions here. My personal belief is that any actions like that, I'm not in support of. Based on my experience and here in Delaware, I feel that the local police departments know their communities better than those at the federal level. If a police department is doing the job that they should be doing, which is embedding themselves in the community, knowing who the community leaders are, having communication with them, they are the best ones to have on the front lines and talking with those protesters and the people who are bringing issues to them. When you bring in the individuals at the federal level, they have no buy-in with this community. And so they're here for the short time. They do what they have to do. Then they get on a plane and they leave. And you never see them again. So where is their buy-in? As a local police department, we have buy-in because we have to interact every day with those communities that we serve. We don't have an option to say, well, you know what, we just pick up and tomorrow we're going to be in California. No, we're going to be here. We're going to be here for the long haul. So if you're going to have to bring anyone in, it should be done by the local jurisdictions. They should be the ones who are out there. They should be the ones who know their community members the best. And that's why I am not a person that's in support of it. And I see what is taking place out in Portland. And I think that part of the problem is simply that the people that they're bringing in have no ties to the community. And they're only here for a short time. They're here to do one specific job and get up and leave, and then they never have to answer any questions. It's a lot different when you work with a community, and you have to deal with them on a regular basis, because they're going to hold you accountable. And I know just yesterday, 2 days ago, there's a young man here in Delaware who organized several of the protests here in Delaware. His brother's name is Keith James. And I know Keith, and Keith and I have talked on numerous occasions. And, he's a sharp young man, about 23, 24 years old. And I felt like we have an academy in this right now. And I felt that it was necessary for our academy, the recruits in our academy, to hear directly from a protester, a person who has organized several protests here in Delaware. And, I can do that because I live here, I work here, and I'm engaged. And so it went over extremely well. But if you have a federal person that comes in, or a federal law enforcement that comes into a community, they want to know to reach out to a Keith James. When the protests and everything was taking place, they want to know to reach out to him,
Right.
and quite frankly, I don't know if many of them would care to, because again, they're just here for a short time. So I'm opposed to it. I think it's silly.
Wow, that's strong. You said you think it's silly.
Yeah.
Some folks have questioned, Colonel, whether that violates civil liberties. Many civil libertarians would look at that and say, uninvited, we can't have federal troops coming into states and local towns and cities. That kind of violates the separation between what is federal and what is state and municipal, don't you think?
Well, I think that's open for debate, because you will hear some that will say, because they are at the federal level, that they do have jurisdiction, they do have jurisdiction, and they can come in and operate. Now, normally what happens is that before the federal department comes in, usually there's conversation taking place. You're working out exactly what is going to happen and what is going to take place. I think what's unusual about what little bit I do know about for instance, the Portland situation, it seems like that they just descended on Portland, and it doesn't seem like any of the local elected leaders were aware that this was going to take place, nor were the local police departments. And I think that also has created part of the problem and the issue. So, but I think it's up for debate. I've heard some say that no, they can't come in, but I also know that at the federal level that they do have jurisdiction, and I think that they are allowed and permitted to come in and take action. They just usually do it a different way based on the experiences I've had with the federal level.
Yes. Perhaps, Doug, we'll take just two more questions and then we'll close out.
All right. So here's one. Can you talk about the role of Delaware local and county police with federal immigration enforcement?
Oh, that's short. We don't get involved with that. Our county executive came out with a directive shortly after he took office, where there was a lot of talk about deporting people and working alongside of federal agents in terms of detaining people who were possibly here in the country illegally. Yeah, listen, we have our hands full with everything that we deal with here in Newcastle County. I do not have the resources nor the time to sit there and track down whether or not a person is in this country legally or not. However, now I will say this, that if we have a serious case when we're talking about a murder or a rape type of investigation, something along those lines, and we determine that a person, the suspect or the defendant in that case, is possibly in this country illegally, at that point, we will make contact to confirm that if they are here legally, okay, we're fine. If they're not, then we will have communication with immigration, because in all likelihood, you want to have a detainer, because the one thing that you don't want to have happen is a person who is facing a crime of that nature, if they were able to post bail, which in all likelihood they wouldn't be able to, but if they were able to post bail, fleeing this country and avoiding prosecution. But on your on our daily interactions, if we're going into making a car stop and stopping an individual who may be from another country, we're not getting into, where are your papers, calling immigration. We don't assist on any kind of raids that take place at all. That's not what our role is, and we pretty much stay clear of that.
Thank you, Colonel Vaughn. We had a discussion last week on this Solidarity Wednesdays with one of our deacons, Reverend Carlos Reyes, and we talked extensively about issues of immigration and global migration. So that helps add to that conversation there. Brother Doug, is there one more question you can take to close?
Yeah, the last one that I see. What do you think it will take for the officers who constantly do the right thing and follow their oaths to stand up and hold those officers who do not do the right thing accountable?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it? I lost you for a second.
Sure. What will it take for the officers who can constantly do the right thing and follow their oath to stand up and hold accountable the officers who do not?
What will it take?
Yes.
Well, what it would take, I would surely hope that it wouldn't take much. I would hope that, this goes back, in my opinion, it goes back to the hiring process and who we're looking to hire. And you're looking to hire individuals who have that their character is impeccable. That these are people who understand the difference between right and wrong, that they have ethics and they have values and morals. And so if we have that, the goal is, as the police department, is to continue to hone those skills and make sure that they don't fall by the wayside. And so for us, how do you make sure that happens? I think it comes with making sure that we are constantly talking about doing the right thing, that we're constantly looking at and providing examples of other police departments, and at times ourselves, who fall short in this category, and the consequences of them falling short. How there is a loss of trust in the community when you have officers who fail to take action and fail to police one another. And so I think it has to be constant messages along those lines, not just from the chief of police, but from the first line supervisors, our sergeants. And I shared an email or sent an email to all of our sergeants, because in my opinion, the sergeants are the most critical supervisory rank that we have in the police department. They are the ones who are out there on the front lines with the men and women. They are going to complaints with them. They're able to see our officers in action. They're able to read them and understand whether or not they're adhering to policies and procedures, and they're able to hold them accountable. And so our supervisors have to be the one. Our sergeants have to play a critical role in making sure that they are preaching to their officers the importance of doing things the right way and holding each other accountable. And I think when that happens, you see less problems and issues within a department.
Okay, thank you very much. We have been talking with Colonel Vaughn Jr. He is the Chief of Police for Newcastle County, Delaware. We're thankful for you, sir, and we will pray your protection and God's grace on you as you do this most important job. And we're thankful especially for tonight for you being able to share your time with us. Keep in mind, everyone listening, that next week, same time, same place, we will have as our guest the Reverend Kyungmo Koo. He is the co-pastor of Christ United Methodist Church in Salisbury, Maryland, and also our own Episcopal leader, Bishop Peggy Johnson. They will be talking about issues regarding cross-racial and cross-cultural appointments in the United Methodist Church for pastors being appointed to various churches within our connection. So you don't want to miss that next week. And so thank you each and every one for joining us on tonight. Colonel Vaughn, any final words you want to say to us before we close out?
I just, again, thank you for the opportunity. I didn't know who Reverend Archie was until today. I made a phone call and I got a phone call from a lady who's like a second mother to me, Miss Juanita Seabury, that goes to Simpson. And I said, she asked what I was doing tonight. I said, I'm supposed to be on a call with a Reverend Archie. I said, I think he heard me on something else. And she said, Reverend Archie? And I said, she said, oh, he's the big wig. He's the one that he oversees. And I said, oh, really? I said, I didn't know, but she wanted me to pass that on and say, tell you hello, and she's praying for you. So
what a wonderful lady she is, a woman of faith, and so thank God for her.
Yes. Her younger son who passed away was my best friend, best man in my wedding, godfather to my oldest daughter, and so she's been in my life as long as I've been alive, almost. So, but she wanted to say that. But again, thank you. I know someone had put something on the chat, and they asked, could we answer their question? And I don't know if your moderator can pull it up or not. I'm not sure.
Let me see. David Kane. What's your favorite social justice slogan? I believe is what he wanted to know.
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I have a favorite. I don't know if I have a favorite. No one's ever asked me that. No, I really don't know. There's a lot that I like, but I can't sit here and tell you right off the top of my head that I have one.
All right. Well, you had the last word, Colonel Vaughn, and I'm thankful for you for your time with us on tonight. Let us all remember who we are. We are followers of Jesus Christ, disciples, called to make a difference in this world. As United Methodists, we say that we're called to make disciples who go forth and make other disciples, and we're called to be transforming agents in this world. So take that with you. Tell somebody in your church, somebody in your neighborhood, your family, about our Solidarity Wednesdays broadcast, and we'll see you on next week. God bless you all. Have a good night.
Good night.